Hello and welcome. As usual, we'll give a few minutes for folks who are on the Zoom call to get joined in and ready to go, and then we'll get started. Thank you. I now call this meeting of the South Willoughby School Board to order. We will begin with turning it over to Director Jackson for a comment on the land acknowledgement.
Thank you. As many of you know, we begin these meetings with a land acknowledgement. The district's stated and written land acknowledgement appears on the screen. And in lieu of reading it aloud, I'd actually love to pass to Dr. Moshe to share a little bit about how our land acknowledgement and Indigenous education in general were addressed today during a program with staff.
Thank you. And I'm warning the administrative team now, since they were all there, that I'd love for them to chime in with their impressions. So we had a very, I'll do a quick superintendent's update now. We had a very really good first day with staff, and the morning was spent with Bridget Walker working on our culture of care, conflict to connection, and working with staff on that concept, and ending her morning portion with making sure we all put our own oxygen masks on first, take care of ourselves so that we can take care of others, which ended with lunch and then went right into exploring the time immemorial curriculum. And we had Willard Bill from OSPI, who is also a Puyallup tribal member, but we had many, many folks here from the Tulalip tribes, representing tribes within the Tulalip tribes, from a very young person to some elders. And they really shared their experience in our public schools, as well as in schools, tribal schools, part of Tulalip's tribal schools, and their ancestry and their trauma from those experiences, and providing insight to staff on how they may be able to connect with all students, but certainly our Indigenous students, on recognizing how their ancestry was essentially ripped from them. The formal decrees by the United States to not allow the use of language, the Lashute Seed language in particular, they discussed in detail about how it was almost lost. But I am by no means an expert, and I'm actually going to turn to Scott, who was also there, who has spent a lot of time learning the Lashute Seed language, to share his thoughts. And this is all spontaneous. None of us are prepared, so I appreciate that Scott's taken the microphone and he's ready to go.
Well, thank you. No, it was a very powerful afternoon. I think one of the things that struck me is the beauty of the storytelling with all of its tragedy and its trauma. I think we heard from every person from who presented this afternoon, telling very personal stories about their experience and their traumas in their lives, and how in different ways their stories, their language, their culture has been ripped from them, and how Indigenous education, how their own ability to learn through their own volition in many cases, or people who mentored them, or organizations that are associated with Tulalip or other tribal entities, really provided a place for them or in families too. I want to be clear, families was a big part of it, connecting with their past in spite of all of the very overt efforts to destroy the culture that is so central to their being. And I think it was very moving because, you know, those stories, the experiences, the culture, the practices, the family connections that are so central. It was very visceral today. It was you could feel the power of those experiences and how it shaped their lives and how passionate they are about making sure that our own students have at least a sense of that, even though they may not be native, but some may be, and in various ways, it's not only it's not just their story, it's our story, and we all need to own it. And I thought that was something that in a lot of different ways we got this afternoon. It was very powerful. And they spoke a lot using their language, the Snohomish language. And so that was very beautiful. And again, I think it really centered their culture in the conversation this afternoon. This wasn't just about this was not about teaching a curriculum. It was about having a deeper understanding of a life way that has been under attack.
I just wanted to add that one of the things that really struck me is the connection between our presentation by Bridget Walker around trauma and the impacts and the stories from the folks from Tulalip and the generational trauma and how their culture is really what is saving their people, their children, and what a lesson that is for us as well. So and the generosity, the spirit that they brought of, we would love to come to your classrooms, we would love to come to your school. How can we support you? It was a really moving afternoon.
At the end, it's always fun to see staff as they're getting those light bulb of ideas coming up, and a lot of people to connect it to curriculum. We're talking about one of my social studies and English teachers talked about how within English they could utilize some short stories from what they're doing in their history class with regard to time immemorial, so that they are encompassing more of the lessons and more than just, a lot of the obligation feels like it's in social studies, but it's not. So there's conversation of how does this work in interdisciplinary ways, and those connections were being made, and excitement was there.
So something that the testimonies of the Tulalip people in the afternoon was very emotional. There weren't many dry eyes talking about their personal struggles, especially in public education. And it just kind of reminds us that it's, you know, all minoritized groups that are struggling, and we have to remember that. But also in the testimonies, they shared relatives that were forced to go to boarding schools and the horrific abuse that they had to go through. So again, I think it was really valuable. And my favorite part was the first song that they sang, just sent chills down my spine. I mean, it was amazing.
Thank you. We also asked them to take our land acknowledgement and review it and let us know if it speaks to them, if we need to modify it, if they would want to come in and help us modify it. And they were very appreciative of the opportunity to share their stories. So I agree with everything that was said. It was very moving. There were things that just stuck out that I was not aware of. As someone who was raised in a Eurocentric household, I didn't think of any of those things as a child growing up. I just thought everybody grew up the way I grew up. And to hear stories of folks who say, I grew up here, but my story is nothing like your story. My story is one of grandparents who were in boarding schools that I didn't even get to know, or the 10,500 bodies that have so far been found under those boarding schools of abused infants in many cases. So it was striking, and to be so close to so many indigenous populations and the variance among all of those populations of indigenous folks, it just became very emotional, very compelling, very educational and instructive. And I did receive more this year than in years past, though we've gotten compliments on opening day. Opening day is always a tough one because everybody really wants to get into their classroom and do all the things that they need to do before students arrive. And we use it as a learning day. And they were appreciative of that, both morning and afternoon session. Does that help, Marnie?
Yes, thank you so much.
And we'll use this opportunity to transition into our special workshop portion of this meeting to talk about our land acknowledgement and what we've been doing with it. I've been very appreciative of Director Jackson's keeping it live and living and bringing up opportunities for further education frequently, and not just turning it into a performative we read this statement and then move on with our meeting. And so when Director Jackson joined us at one of our leadership meetings and brought up the idea of sort of formalizing and expanding that opportunity, it's a fantastic opportunity for us to discuss it. So Director Jackson, I'd like to turn it over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I have really appreciated first stepping into service with a school board that had a practice of opening with land acknowledgement. That was meaningful for me from the outset. It helped me feel that the health of our community is at the forefront of this district's work, because I think that living on colonized land, and relatively recently colonized land, it is impossible. This is my perspective is we can't be healthy as a community unless we know our history. And as was shared, I think, by Scott, our history is this history, the history of me and my ancestors who are of European descent, the history of indigenous people for whom this land has been home for uncountable generations. Our histories are entwined, and we are currently moving forward together, for better or for worse, with or without that self-understanding that comes from knowledge and from cross-cultural story sharing and from honest reflection. And so for me, a land acknowledgement is not a checkbox where we say we did the thing that's polite to do and now we start our meeting. It's a chance to be in a relationship of ongoing repair with ourselves, with our histories, with one another, with land and place, with human and non-human life. And so I just feel that it is of value to have a written land acknowledgement. It is of greater value to be in relationship with people for whom this history is alive, and ask them, does what we have written speak to how you know things to be, how you know the history to have been? I don't think we can ever come up with written words that are right for every moment or that check the box and make us done. And I think that, you know, each of us learning our own version of how to acknowledge place and ancestral tribal history of place and tribal present and tribal futures of place is just going to be the work of all of our lifetimes. But, you know, as a school district, we are charged with supporting young people as they grow into adulthood and into agency about their own futures. And I just think what better way to do that work than with bigger context about the place and its history and its people and each other. So I would love to just understand how our community wants to engage with the practice of land acknowledgement, how our tribal neighbors reflect upon our practice of land acknowledgement, and see if there's a way to keep it as a vibrant tradition that helps us all grow.
I'd like to suggest that we explicitly review our land acknowledgement every year at a bare minimum, just so it's on the calendar every August. We look at it and see, is this doing what we want it to do? How can we better integrate ourselves into the broader perspective of what this land was and is, and the people who made this land what it was and is? I'd love to see if there are folks who are interested, either students or staff or community members, in coming in and sharing their own version of the land acknowledgement, or what it means to them, more importantly, maybe. Yeah.
Thank you for bringing the topic to the forefront, and thank you, school staff, for sharing your experiences today. That really feels great to have our school staff come together in that way and just be in service to this learning. And I really appreciate that. So thank you. I would also like to offer some gratitude and acknowledgement. My understanding is that Christy Macaro did a lot of the background research on the initial land acknowledgement. And so it came from a place of love, a place of understanding, and a place of deep learning for her as well. And so I would love to have, when it's appropriate and when it feels good to you, some feedback on your feelings about how, we have sort of created this, well, Marnie has really created this construct of applying action items or more knowledge to these key pieces of place for us. And so that would be something that I would hope we could add to the process, is inviting Christy to continue her work in that realm.
Just thank you for acknowledging Christy, because she and Marnie had gone to the session that really ignited bringing them to us today. And Christy arranged it and made the contacts, and the day was spectacular. Lots of really good food, and the timing was great, and the setup was wonderful, and there were folks involved, but Christy certainly took the lead, and Scott made sure we had tables and chairs, and the food service folks were on it. So it really was a good day all around. But yeah, thank you, Christy.
I do also want to note that this is a workshop portion. If there are folks, community members or staff members who are here who would like to chime in, they're certainly welcome to. Also, if you're on Zoom, if you'd like to chime in, you can use the Q&A function. Just enter your name and location, just general location, doesn't have to be your actual address. Hit enter and then type something up, and I'll read it to join in on the conversation. Thank you.
I'm Rufus Rose. In 1975, 76, I'd like to meet this gentleman and talk with him. I took a course in Northwest Native Art and Anthropology at the Everett Community College. There was an instructor there from the Tlingit clan, and Abner Johnson was his name. I don't know if you're familiar with, but I would like to talk to you about his participation with Everett Community College. And with follow-up after that, there's a situation that occurred that I think would be very interesting.
I want to plus one Director Williford's statement about how Director Jackson brings the land acknowledgement to alive and calls us in to either learn more or to do something. It's how it's vibrant each meeting. And also plus one to Director Jackson's comment that the words may never be perfect. But having said that, I as we discuss or the possibility of improving these words, I want to see if we can get the words themselves closer to what we get from Director Jackson, since for everyone else who doesn't come to board meetings, they're on the wall in classrooms. They don't get to experience the way Director Jackson brings it alive. And so can we bring a little bit of that somehow in a static way into the words? And I don't know how to do that. In fact, I think I wouldn't even want to make any permanent changes until we hear from the folks who were at the Time Immemorial presentation today. I feel like it would behoove us to get input from them first. But yeah, I don't have any ideas on how to do that, but that would be like the gold standard for me.
And I'd also like to note, as Mr. Rose said, reaching out to other organizations around the area, continuing to reach out, because I know that Ms. Macaro has done a lot of that already, to other organizations around the area who have viewpoints on these and other issues.
My name is Charlene Smith Davenport. My maternal grandmother's ancestors came from Dublin, Ireland. My maternal grandfather's ancestors were from the Salisbury Plain in England, which is Celtic along with Ireland. My paternal grandmother's ancestors came from Cornwall, England, which is also Celtic. My paternal grandfather's ancestors came from northern Germany with a little bit of Dutch thrown in, which probably was Norse. And I just want to thank you so much for inviting these elders and young people to come. The trauma has also affected this island. In July, when the Blue Heron Canoe family were here and I attended a couple of their workshops, I talked with someone that she had grown up here on the island. And it's a family that's been on this island since a long, long time ago. And she told me that her grandfather, whenever they had a big family gathering, her grandfather would specifically talk to the grandchildren and his own children. He had 15. And he told them to never, never say anything about his native ancestry because bad things will happen. His mother was half Snohomish. His grandmother was full Snohomish. I have no idea what this man has seen happen here on the island, has experienced himself, or seen things happen with his mother or his grandmother. The trauma remains. So what is happening here and now for our young people is desperately, desperately needed. And read, just keep reading. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's a really good reminder that while we often think of things that get lost in the shadow of history, the idea that as soon as the last person who experienced an event passes away, that we don't have that same connection to the events, that even despite that, even in the shadow, these things can affect our current day and our current culture and community. And I think that that's an important reminder for us to keep in mind as we're talking about how we approach this with the school board and within the schools.
Thank you, Brooke. I also would extend that to say that we probably have some experts among our student body, some experts among our parent and family and community body. I will speak for myself in saying that I don't feel eminently qualified to change or move around any of these words. And that having been said, as we move toward action items, as the stewards of these words, I would be willing to help continue to steward whatever needs to move forward. But I absolutely recognize that I am not the person to put pen to paper and process through this in an intimate way, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think one of the best ways to make sure that it's not just like a document on the wall or something we read at meetings is to make sure that like our district does live by it and make sure it's like not just something we read on the walls, as I said earlier. It's something that we all like know what it means. Like we respect their sovereignty, the right to self-determination. That's a big thing in time memorial curriculum. It's a great thing to teach our staff, and it's a great thing to also teach our students. And we can connect those things and really make sure that that document isn't just words on the wall that students have no clue to. Students can know what they mean and apply it.
I think that's incredibly valuable for any words on our wall in the school is making, and I know that our staff does an amazing job of doing that, of introducing the materials in their classroom and that sort of thing. But I think it's really important for anything that we say by rote or put up on a wall to look at as a given, that we make sure that everyone who interacts with it understands it.
You bring up another good point, Carter, that in our school district, we have children from pre-K all the way through 12th grade. And so how are our youngest scholars being like invited into this information and into equity and an understanding of their history as people who live on this island? And so I think that's just food for thought as we continue to sort of process what this is and what it could be and how it could become, or how it could stay alive, and how it could be a teaching tool as well as a guide.
We have a community comment here that I'm going to read briefly. Lori Johnson Langley. The day was amazing. I presented to 100 coalitions at the Coalition Leadership Institute last week. This included Healthcare Authority, DOH, and ESD staff. We shared our land acknowledgement audio from the website. It was appreciated by the room. Marnie, your empathy, appreciation come through in your voice, and I appreciate you recording it. It would be nice to hear it in native language on the website too. I think that would be a fantastic idea.
So something that keeps coming to mind as I'm listening to this conversation is there's an article around white supremacy culture and what are traits of white supremacy culture. And one of them is the worship of the written word. And so I would like to just call out that we're having a lot of conversations about how to memorialize this in written word, and that there could be other ways that this becomes infused in our culture other than putting it on walls and having it written. I'm not saying that that's not what we focus on, but I think, Marnie, that's what you've been trying to get at with what you've been bringing to there. The other trait that is coming up to me is kind of this conversation around agendizing and having things kind of in this structured, organized format. So when I hear things like, well, and Brooke, I totally hear your intention with it, but when I hear things like, well, we should take a look at it once a year, that I feel like is just perpetuating that culture of supremacy. And I think we look at when the people and individuals who this acknowledges and impacts say, hey, we need to look at this, or hey, this isn't meeting our needs at this point in time, or we need to change. That's when we look at it. Marnie, it looks like that might have gotten you thinking.
Oh, well, yeah, I want to plus one your reference to the article. The one I'm thinking of that references that trait is by Tima Okun and Kenneth Jones. And there have been several revisions by the authors, but it's just an extraordinary resource. I recommend Googling it. And Carter, I wanted to plus one your comments too. And what your reflection sparked in me was this thought that the action words that we use in this statement, acknowledging, honoring, giving deepest respect, expressing gratitude. And when I think about when I honor, acknowledge, give respect, express gratitude to people in my life, that's a deeply emotional set of actions. And usually those feelings get given to people or beings or whatever it is that I honor, with a lot of weight, a lot of emotional weight. And so I think about how have I showed those actions to Indigenous people in this time, and I think that happened today. I think that being in respectful, dignified relationship to learn and feel together was a way that respect and dignity and honor were shared in all directions. And so I just think about how are the words in this land acknowledgement actually being lived through me in relationship with people and place. And it helps me feel like my integrity will really come to the fore when I hold those values in my relationships.
I absolutely hear what you say about if we have one meeting where we talk about this, it minimizes it.
And I know that you're not talking about like one. I know you said like at least
Right.
once, right? Yeah. No. Yeah.
My thinking behind that, and I'm totally fine if we go some completely different way because it makes sense the way you mention it. My thinking about that is going beyond having an open door, going beyond saying, if someone has a problem with this, they can absolutely come to us and talk to it, and setting an invitation at the table to come talk to us about this.
I think what I might suggest is asking tribal members what would feel respectful, because my understanding is that they have been inundated with a lot of conversations around land acknowledgements and wanting, stamps of approvals on land acknowledgements. And so, and there's also a culture and a way that is best approached. And so I think that having a conversation with our local tribes and saying what would feel authentic and genuine for you, for us, and what ways would be appropriate for us to ensure that this is not just a check the box situation, but that we are having regular touch points where we want to build a relationship. And I think that that's where a lot of agencies, not just school districts, but all of the agencies really missed the mark, was that they didn't intentionally build a relationship with the tribes that they are wanting to honor and speak to.
Yeah, I hear that very well. It's hey, is this okay? Is this okay? Is this okay? Rather than what's best for you.
And so my question would be, how do we build more of a relationship with the tribe?
Well, and it sounds like Dr. Moshe and the administration are working on that. So it might be something just to add to the list of conversation topics is how can our board best hear from you what would be respectful and honor appropriate and acknowledge appropriately.
I think the relationship began today. There was a lot of conversation, a lot of emotion shared, and a lot of folks saying at the end, meeting with individual people and saying, how can I learn more? How can I, can you come to my class? However we can engage in a relationship. But that was the first part of the conversation, was this is the beginning of a relationship, as opposed to one and done.
Excellent. Lori, Johnson, and Langley, we need reaction button access, hands clapping. And Carter, I saw you had something you wanted
To tag along to Andrew's point, what was I gonna say? I think it would be good to expand the true connection and conversation. You can't just be focusing on the written word. Kind of tagging along to Andrew's point, has to expand beyond just the land acknowledgement where we're having these conversations at a board level to actually the whole what actions are being taken and the whole culture that is there. It wasn't even too long ago that I was in 6th grade learning more about Manifest Destiny than I was about any Indigenous history. There's a lot of things that are beyond just the written word and culture-wise that need to be addressed, and that conversation should be open for the entire arena.
Thank you all. I just feel really inspired by this conversation and the context that we're in right now, where we actually have those relationships starting to be strengthened, some of them just starting to be formed. And I think all I long for in relation to this written land acknowledgement is that it grows. It wasn't so long ago that the languages of this region were oral and spoken, and turning some of them into written languages was a survival strategy. And we're fortunate to have a written translation of Lushootseed as part of a dictionary of a language that was nearly lost. But I just think there is something about being in conversation that can never be put on paper. And being not just in conversation, but in heart connection and in service on the land and in the soil and in the forest and on the water. So all the ways that we relate with the history and people and future of this place are going to be rich additions to our educational context.
I'd like to acknowledge Ms. Makara back there scrolling through our land acknowledgement on our website, on our district website, and all the additional resources, including the written Lushootseed translation, the pronunciation of the Lushootseed, and several interviews with local tribal leaders. Just fantastic
Brilliant. Thank you.
expansions. And again, those are on the district's land acknowledgement page. I'd like to suggest that we are wide open if folks want to come in and share their views on the land acknowledgement with us, as you have been doing. But to Director Downs's point, not having a specific calendar point to talk about it going forward, just remaining open and trusting to the administration and Dr. Moshe in particular to continue building that relationship to the point where hopefully they feel comfortable coming to us with any concerns.
Thank you. I would also say I want to thank in particular Mr. Rose, who offered email feedback about the practice of land acknowledgement, and we engaged in an email dialogue about the questions that this discussion and practice spark for each of us. I also want to offer an invitation for anyone who wishes to be a guest reader of a land acknowledgement and or a guest extemporaneizer of a land acknowledgement. Doesn't have to be the written words. If there's somebody with interest in doing that, please be in touch. And I would very particularly welcome if there are people with tribal ancestry of this region who wish to have the mic during the introductory portion of a meeting in lieu of my land acknowledgement practice. I would love to share that time. Thank you.
Are you comfortable being the clearinghouse for that conversation?
Yes, please. I would like to receive communication on that topic so that we can be planful. And you can reach me via email or through public comment during a meeting. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay. Anything else to discuss on this agenda item? Thank you very much. We'll move out of the workshop format and into our business meeting. During this meeting, we will have both public hearing and public comments sections. The public hearing comments are specifically on a budget extension that we will be hearing about hearing more about shortly. We heard about at our last workshop, and that will be comments specifically on the budget and budget extension. And then public comments slightly later in the meeting will be an opportunity for comment on whatever topic you would like. This will not become a back and forth discussion with the school board, but it is an opportunity for you to share your views with the school board. If you are in the room and would like to speak during public comment, please see Mrs. Makar at the back. If you are on the Zoom meeting and would like to make public comment, please note your name and location, just that to start with in the Q&A function, and then write up your comment in the Q&A function, and I will read it at the appropriate time. Please do keep in mind our professional communications policy in regards to public comment. If there is, or if there are personal attacks or anything like that, you'll be asked to stop making them and to stop speaking if you continue making them. If you type them in a comment, I will simply skip that portion of your comment. Moving right along. Are there any objections to approving the agenda and minutes as presented? Hearing none, the agenda and minutes are approved. Is there any objections to approving the consent agenda as presented? Hearing none, the consent agenda is approved, which includes the approval of the South Willoughby Elementary School field trip to Camp Kirby for the 5th grade. We'll move on to presentations. We're going to go first to our student report to Carter and Callahan. Thank you.
So this week we had a lot of sports start up. Other than that, students have been enjoying the summer. I know cross country camp just happened over the past 2 days, which was fun.
Yeah, I also think like students are like prepping to get back to school and just like get back in their routines.
I figured this one would be short, but wanted to make sure we kept that space carved out. Thank you very much. We'll move on to the 2023-2024 budget extension, and I will turn it over to Mr. Field.
Good evening. So on the screen I'm showing here is the budget extension report. It's called the F200. And in that report, we had to increase our revenue based off the apportionment report because it gets updated through the year. So requesting a revenue increase of 521,000, which isn't really relevant to this conversation, but also increasing our expenditures to $550,000. We had, or increasing our overall expenditures $550,000. When we started budgeting for this fiscal year, we weren't 100% sure if we were going to have a TK program. And then once the budget was passed, the decision to run TK came into play, and that added additional staffing for the TK teacher. We also had additional costs related to our special ed department. It's overall going to be pretty much net zero with these two additions. And you'll see in my financial report later, we were bumping right up against our budget capacity. But I know today, after our August payroll and August check runs have been done, we're actually coming just under our maximum allowable cost by a tune of $150,000. However, during the year-end close process, we accrue expenses back into the current year. So we pay our August power and utilities in September, but then we record those expenses in August. So I'd like to still move forward with the budget extension to give us capacity if we have to make additional changes as part of the year-end process.
Just as a note for those listening at home, TK is transition to kindergarten. Thank you very much, Mr. Field. I know that we went over this more in depth at the previous meeting. Are there any comments or questions from up here on the dais?
I just want to repeat something that was made very clear during the last meeting, which was that this is a very typical process and is just part of being in good stewardship of our books and budget.
And the reminder, as Mr. Field said, that the majority of this is covered by an increase in revenue for this past year also. Else? Okay, we will now open up a public hearing we will suspend the business meeting and have a public hearing on the 2023-2024 budget extension. Are there any comments to be had on this budget extension? I'll give it a few moments in case there are folks online who would like to type in their name and location to make a comment. There is nothing so long in the world as a full minute of dead air. Okay, seeing no comments coming in on Zoom and seeing none here in the room, we'll move on. We'll close the public hearing and resume our business meeting.
Wait, we got a online.
Oh, there is a Q&A here. Gwendy Gabeline from Freeland has a question of what income did we get that was extra. This is not usually a question and answer time, but Mr. Field, if you're interested in answering that question.
So the transitional kindergarten income also was not budgeted because we weren't planning to have the program. And then some of the funding overall and the apportionment report came in higher than budgeted related to special ed and other things. There was an adjustment this year for I believe it was paraeducators that we got additional funding for. So that wasn't in the original budget. As part of the F200 process, they ask that you write up your revenue to what you expect in your apportionment report because it's updated at the time that I did this in July. So that's the reflected increase in the revenue as the actual funds that's on our apportionment report that's greater than what was written in the original budget.
So a lot of that is legislative action from the previous, the January session, yes?
It's also not that it's extra, it's that it's funding that follows student enrollment. So when the TK students showed up on our enrollment report, funding follows that.
Excellent. Now I will close the public hearing and resume the business meeting. We move into public comments. If anyone has a public comment here, Mr. Rose, I believe you're first on the list.
You may know this, but I wanted to draw your attention that today is a very significant day in country's history. It's the year that a boy who was 14 years old named Emmett Till was murdered. I encourage you to, if you don't know about that, to read it and the follow-on stuff. Emmett Till, from Chicago, murdered in Mississippi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rose, for sharing that important and tragic incident in our history and connecting it to what's going on today. Thank you. Are there any other public comments to be had? Oh, thank you. Yes. As that's happening, we will close public comment then and move on to our new business. We have 3 action items tonight. First, Memorandum 2324 60, approval of Resolution 690, budget extension for 2023-24 general fund. Is there any discussion or commentary to be had among the leadership team? I thought we had covered that pretty well. Also, thank you very much. I would like advisory votes from our student representatives, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. All those in favor of approving Memorandum 2324-60, approval of Resolution 690, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. The memorandum has been approved. Memorandum 2324-61, approval of PSE and SEIU 2024-2025 contracts. Dr. Moshe, if you would address those briefly.
Certainly. We were able to successfully negotiate together for collective bargaining agreements with both PSE and SEIU, and they're there for the board's perusal. They're within the board's parameters that were set for district leadership, and they've been fully ratified by their respective unions. So they're on the board's agenda tonight for approval, consideration of approval.
Are there any comments, questions, or discussion from the board?
I just want to thank everybody involved in the process to get us to an agreement. And I understand that there were great people advocating on behalf of our employees and the district. And I'm glad that we can have this opportunity to continue working together in ways that support the district and its team.
Okay, all those, may we have advisory votes, please?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you both very much. All those in favor of approving Memorandum 2324-61, the PSE and SEIU contracts, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. Memorandum 2324-61 has been approved. Our final action item for the evening, Memorandum 2324-62, approval of the electric school bus purchase. Dr. Moshe, if you'd like to address that.
Certainly. The board has the information, and we have Mr. Field and Mr. Peacock. Should you have further questions, essentially, this bus purchase, there is some grant money for it, not as much grant money as for the last electric bus, but this bus will be less expensive than a diesel bus. It will probably take a year for it to come in, and it will require, again, that we reduce the fleet by 1 diesel bus. I don't know if I've covered everything, if you have additional comment, but both our folks who are in charge of this, between Paul and Scott, they recommend that the superintendent bring this to the board, and I concur with their recommendation.
I would just add, I mean, this is a good deal for our district financially. Typically, for example, a Bluebird bus right now under a diesel Bluebird bus is under state bid pricing is $199,000, but depending on the options, it's somewhere around $175,000 to $200,000 for a diesel bus. So this is with the grant money of $250,000 being credited out of the 410 cost. We're still coming in at $156,000. So we're paying less for an electric bus that lists at $410,000 than we would for a diesel bus. we're also getting, I think the other important factor here is we're also getting the full depreciation amount over 14 years of the $410,000. So we're getting $410,000 over the coming years with a cost of $156,000. So financially, that makes a lot of sense, I think.
Thank you. I'm curious if you have confidence that our charging infrastructure will be sufficient and reliable by the time this bus is delivered?
Yes, I am, and our charging situation right now is very reliable, and we're going to be adding another charger, and we will be able to add a third without expanding our capacity at the bus barn. Beyond that, we will have to look at options as far as how we expand the bus capacity to go beyond 3 buses. But for now, we're in good shape and have room for one more. I would add that, because I did reference earlier that in a previous meeting that we did have problems charging the bus that we currently have. Those problems have been resolved because the condition of making this purchase was that problem needed to be resolved, and we needed to be satisfied that we would not be having that same problem again. The problem was identified. It was an isolated problem in this particular bus, not a statewide issue, not relative to a recall. So we're satisfied that we're going to be able to move forward and have confidence that the bus we get next time will be fully functional and not have the charging problems that we experienced this time. We currently have a bus now that's charging just fine. Our current bus is great now, so.
Is our current bus IC?
Yes,
well?
it is an IC bus.
And how did you, the charging issue aside, how did you make the determination to purchase a second IC bus as opposed to a competitor?
That's a great question. There's really 3 different major issues or major features that make IC a better option than the others. One is the battery capacity is 210 kilowatts, which is greater than the competitors. I want to say Thomas is at 194 kilowatts, and Bluebird is 156. So that allows us a better range. We also have a warranty that's longer. IC has one of the best warranties in the business, though Thomas does have an 8-year warranty comparable to what we have. Their warranty provider is going bankrupt right now, so it's unknown as to whether that will actually come to fruition for those people who have that warranty. And I believe Thomas has a 5-year. Oh, Thomas has the 8-year, and Bluebird has a 5-year warranty on their batteries. So ours is we're in good shape with the warranty relative to the industry as well. There's some things with regenerative braking that are also beneficial to this bus as well that make it stand apart from the others.
I had a question that I apologize I didn't get to you ahead of time. I promise I'm not trying to surprise you. Just a question about the trade-in credit. These are buses that are done depreciating, so we are not getting any further money for them, and they're not currently in use.
They're not currently in use. That's correct. And trading these in now is not going to inhibit our capacity to destroy a bus if we get a future grant. For example, we still know that if we get a grant this next year, we'll destroy bus 34, which will still be in the fleet and able to be scrapped under the typical conditions of a grant.
Excellent. Any other comments or questions? Have you heard anything about the student experience riding these electric buses, or have you experienced it yourself besides the one tour that we got?
I've heard the electric bus is really nice. I know bus overcrowding is always kind of a bit of an issue. But yeah, the electric bus has been everyone wants to be on that bus for sure.
Well, that reminded me, there was I heard, I don't know if this is accurate, so I apologize for that. I heard that there were some drivers who were concerned about the snub nose of the electric bus as compared to the longer nose, the opposite. The opposite. They were concerned about the longer nose, so they didn't have as much visual capacity in front of the bus. So is this the same model?
Yes, we have, yeah. And we have it should be the same. Yep.
Yep. All right. Thank you.
And our driver who does drive that bus loves it. So.
Excellent. Yeah. I would expect that, considering the demonstration of the acceleration, the quietness, it was unlike driving on a bus at all. It was fantastic. Any other comments or questions?
I just really want to acknowledge student voice and student leadership in asking our district to move towards greener technologies. And I think being an early adopter of new green technology is a service to the broader community as we figure out what works and why. And I just feel excited that we get another opportunity to make our fleet greener and stronger.
Absolutely. +1 on the student leadership there, and also to the administration for following up on that. Like a lot of administrations hear student voices and go, maybe, but followed up on it, got engaged in the grant, and now we're getting our second one. So thank you on both sides.
Again, just to clarify, the grant was in.
Yes, sorry.
And then we heard from our students.
Yes,
So
sorry.
we were there together, but just
Sorry.
don't want to,
Yes.
I don't want to lose sight of the fact that we both want the same thing.
Yes.
And our student advocacy has really put us out in the forefront.
Sorry, marching alongside one another towards this conclusion. Okay, anything else? Can we have student advisory votes on this memorandum?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All those in favor of approving memorandum 232462, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. The memorandum has passed. That concludes our new business for the evening. We will move on to our reports. First to Mr. Field for the financial report.
All right, so this is the financial report for July. Let's go to the next page. So here's our normal slide. They say we're 92% through the year, 93% of our revenue and 92.74 of our expenditures. So right on track. Our trends are, again, just laying right on top of each other like they have all year long. There's nothing out of the ordinary for July as we kind of start wrapping up with our final influx of payroll. And then we just have our normal contracts in August, which you'll see when we see the August report. This is why we did the budget extension, is because originally when we first saw this in June, the encumbrances looked like we were going to be pushing us over. I have confirmed as we sit today, we're okay, but we are right up against our budget capacity. Again, this is just another picture of our revenue and expenditures over time. And again, we're just right on trend with what we have been historically. We're at a 22.9% fund balance. Whoops, I went through that faster than I expected. So again, just bumping along historical trend, just like we always had. It's just kind of business as usual through July. There wasn't anything untimely payments or out of ordinary payments or anything like that. It was business as usual. So we'll see some big differences here is when we look in the capital projects fund. You'll see that revenue year to date is $32 million. That's the landing of the bond and the interest that we got and the timing that we had the bond there. That's what that revenue number is. Had significant bond payments or expenditures between the bond and levy both. Debt service, the revenue that you see there is we got selling cost as part of the bond sale that lands in the debt service fund to make sure that we have sufficient funds when we need to make our first bond payment. And then ASB, transportation vehicle, and private trust were all just pretty normal, nothing out of the ordinary there. And with that, it's pretty quick for July. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Not a question, just a reminder to the community that the 22.9% budget or fund balance is to continue to keep our staffing levels as high as possible and to provide the best possible support through the current coming years as we draw down that fund balance too.
Correct.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Appreciate the update even on the quiet months. Any other comments or questions on that? Okay, I'll turn it over to Dr. Moshe for, I know you already gave a lot of your superintendent's report but anything else?
I don't have anything to add. We had a great first day and looking forward to students coming back Tuesday.
As a parent, I too am looking forward to students going back on Tuesday. Sorry, students. Any legislative report or other board member report?
Yes, thank you. I would love to share some upcoming events involving legislation. I would like to pull up a notice received from WASDA about the upcoming General Assembly. I unfortunately will be unable to participate in the General Assembly as our representative. I'll be exploring my own ancestry by visiting my ancestral homeland of Scotland, which I've never visited. So I'm very excited to be out of town and very sorry to miss the General Assembly. If you can bear with me for a moment while I pull up the content of this message, there are several specific opportunities that I hope our board can take part in. One being there is a candidate filing window. If any of you wish to be of service more broadly with a seat on the State Board of Education or in a WASDA director area, you can apply to be a candidate for one of those positions until September 16th. So that might be something to consider for all of those of you with a lot of extra time and energy. I also wanted to share that we are going to be at the annual conference, which is a nice opportunity to collaborate with our fellow school administrators and board directors and student representatives. That'll be exciting. And then the General Assembly is coming up. It takes place on September 20th. I will have landed from my travels the night before, and I'm going to be so jet lagged that I'm not even willing to consider it. But I think that if we could have a delegate attend, it would be really great. So if any of you wants to reflect on whether you can participate, maybe let me know. We shouldn't discuss it, but for purposes of scheduling, I would say you can email me to let me know if you can be that delegate.
Well, and I remember last year we sort of patchworked it together between, I think, 3 or 4 of us.
That's
So
right.
that
We
could be a-
definitely tag teamed. And so there is a handbook that we should each review in advance, and we should make recommendations to whoever will be our delegate about positions that we wish to take. I wish, and I'm sorry that I haven't done more to prepare us for, but I wish that we might, as a board, discuss what some of our priority positions are. And if it's possible to create space for that in our next meeting. I personally won't be at our next meeting due to my travel, but I think it would be a really great use of time. And I would encourage the board to engage in that discussion if time allows. And then there's a great deal of content offered by WASDA in the month leading up to General Assembly so that people can be as engaged and prepared as possible. So I'm going to forward this email from WASDA to each of you, and I just encourage you to look at the resources that are enclosed therein.
I do want to note that one of the items up for adoption on the General Assembly is the Student Rep Network Greater Voice that we as a board supported. So whoever is representing us at that point, it would behoove us to speak up on that, on behalf of that.
Indeed. Thank you. And I'll also say that if it's not possible for one of us to participate as a delegate, I could at the very least round up perspectives and make sure that they get shared in writing prior to that September 20th day.
Director Greenhair and I are working on the application for the Board of Distinction again this year. They've changed the format slightly to look at multiple years. In the past, it's what have you done over the last year? And now they're recognizing that it takes multiple years to actually see the results of what you're doing. And one of the standards that they're looking to see viewpoints on is how curriculum has affected students. And so we have a very strong story to tell there that we'll be focusing on pretty intently there.
Marnie, can I ask a clarifying question? So when I look at the state board elections page, the second paragraph says the person elected to the State Board of Education may not concurrently serve as a member of the State Board of Education and as an employee of any school, college, university, or other educational institution, or any educational service district, superintendent's office, or in the Office of Public Instruction, or as a member of the board of directors of either a public school district or a private school district. So I hope none of you apply.
Wow. I am really glad you read the fine print because I figured that if WASDA was writing to its school directors with this invitation that we were allowed to respond while being school directors. So I'm glad you read that, and I'm sorry that that makes each of us ineligible. I wonder if they allow students to serve, because I don't
You're
think,
not ineligible. You would just have to
Well,
resign.
yeah, right now I would say that I consider myself morally ineligible.
Any other board comments or reports?
I just want to give the board an update on our presentation for the WASDA annual conference, which, as a reminder, isn't until November, but these types of things sneak up on us. I started a basic outline of how we want, or how I propose us to present, and also incorporated the feedback from the workshop in which we chose the topic. A lot of my colleagues' rationales for why we chose the topic actually makes for good content on the topic itself. I would invite one board colleague to join me in working on this together. Obviously, the whole board will get the opportunity to review the slides, but to not run afoul of any open meetings rules, I can work closely with one other. I can work. Thank you, Director Downs. I'll be in touch. And wishing all the entire school community educational and smooth back to school.
I think that's a fantastic note to end on. Thank you. Good night. This meeting is adjourned.